Yeah. And Claire, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, well, welcome everyone. And so we're going to do this a little differently than we have done the update sessions previously. And we thought we would, what we really wanted to do was check in with all of you and see, what your questions are, what you're bringing, just what you would like to just talk about. And we also wanted to share some of the most recent, like really exciting news that yeah, we've been waiting for an opportunity to do that. And I think we talk about this later on, but yeah, this is the 1 year anniversary of us actually begin launching Regenerate Cascadia through the Edge Pride. So we'll talk about that later. But um, yeah, so I'm just trying to decide. Maybe it would be good for us just to, it won't take that long, but just to kind of let you know what recently has happened in terms of news. And then we'd love to just kind of see. Um, I think, what do you say, Brandon, that we go for half an hour or so, or three-quarters of an hour for, and then start in the presentation. So, um,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think we can let it flow pretty organically. I'd love if people want to jump in. We can also talk a little bit about if people have questions about the structure that we're growing with Regenerate Cascadia in terms of the organizations, guilds, hubs, projects. We thought this would be a great opportunity to clarify some of those, but would love to have it be a little bit more of a flow of an informal conversation. And then we can also, we'll touch on that in the scripted presentation that we'll do later. But Claire, I'd love to turn it over to you to share some of the updates.
Yeah. Okay, so this is really huge news, but we recently had confirmation that we've received a 250,000 Novo Foundation grant, and that there's an expectation that this is the beginning of a longer term relationship, and that they really want to support the Regenerate Cascadia vision. So that's huge. But at the scale of Cascadia, it's like, how do we prioritize where that needs to go? And I mean, really, what it's meant to do is support the core structure at this point for Regenerate Cascadia. Um, and yeah, up until this point, other than the $5,000 grant, I mean, prize money that we got, and there was $2,000 from the design school, but really, Brandon and I haven't been paid up until this point. So it's, we've been, it's a huge relief to know that that funding is coming in. But yeah, that's so, just wanted to announce that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
If
And they're amazing, by the way. I just wanted to put that in there. I mean, we don't know them that well. We're developing a relationship, but everything that has come across has been that they are genuinely interested in relationship-based organizing, and that the core vision that we're holding is what they're supporting, and that is huge. So yeah. So
yeah,
then,
and just
what
to
is it?
be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, Brandon. I'd love you to add something in there, and then I'll go on to the next thing.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in real quick and say, like, so Claire touched on this, but just to be very specific, this is the start of a relationship, and this grant is for 1 year of funding. It's discretionary, entirely up to what Claire and myself would like to put it towards, which is amazing. It's entirely based on trust, um, and but a big part of this then is for us to spend the next year doing a lot of sense making and identifying the needs in different communities so that we can come back, and they are expecting that we will come back with a bigger request next year so that we can actually start to hold these processes. So this year we've really identified, supporting it's meant to support the core processes And we need to do a lot of sense making of what that means in terms of Claire, myself, but what are the other things? How do we get the digital platform up and centralize it? But then what we'd really like to do is also begin exploring the processes that we need in the landscapes. So for both landscape hubs and guilds, and then really start to look at what do different hubs and guilds need to hold those processes. And it's fine to maybe like start that, but the minute that there's trying to hold those processes, it needs to be supported. And actually, I had a great conversation with Brian not too long ago where, he was talking about his needs in Whatcom. He's like, everybody is so strapped. Capacity, this idea of capacity, it's not just us. It's like people are so busy out there doing the work. How can we empower and support the work that they're doing? And it's like in Whatcom, he was saying that they might need a communications person, an educations officer, a development person. And so we really want to think about that too, of like starting to actually work with different landscapes so that they start to put together their own budgets. And then what we can really do is come in to support those processes. So let's help put together like, development plans, fundraising plans, grant writers that can help create strategies in Newport, in Eugene, in Whatcom, in Victoria, in Seattle. And our goal is then to do the sense making to come together that if we actually have a solid number, if Whatcom's like we need XYZ for Whatcom, and Victoria's like we need XYZ for Victoria, and Eugene is like we need XYZ, what we want to do is by next, I guess it'd be probably by next probably actually by the turn of the year, if we can compile that all together in a big budget, we can go back to Novo, as well as many other things, right? But we can go back to Novo and actually say, this is the request of what we want for 2025 to actually start to actually hold the processes more than just sense make.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in there a little bit. So I talked to Brandon briefly, but I had a meeting with Lauren, who's one of the agents from the Novo Foundation, and she's just kind of been reaching out to people. The way she phrased it is people at the roots of Regenerate Cascadia and hearing what they needed. And so we had a wonderful one-on-one Zoom meeting talking about kind of the grassroots needs for our community Whatcom water catchment, and then how that related to the overarching structure and stuff. And she was wonderful, very receptive. She really had some positive input into this. And so I think the way that we're going about it, it resonates with the donors and what they're trying to go after, and that assures that their funds are going to be able to be well placed within the community. So I don't know if I was the only one that she reached out to in that capacity, but I was happy to be at least one of them.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I think that also speaks to, I think this grant opportunity is huge in sense of us being able to not only just have the grant, but also to then leverage it and really start to work on behalf of landscapes and guilds around actually trying to get like additional support. And I think starting to build those connections with the foundations and other things.
Yeah.
But also to start grassroots fundraising, right? Like, and I think a big part of the activation tour when we did it was also about starting to meet people in different landscapes who might also either be or know people who might be willing to be large donors. And I think the nice thing is that if we can support the administration, then we don't even have to be a part of that picture. And then when we go into landscapes, we can say, all right, let's fundraise for Whatcom. Let's fundraise for the Bioregional Learning Group. Let's fundraise for Eugene. And then also try to also match that with like, maybe it's matching donations, maybe it's whatever, or but really starting to actually develop those processes. And if groups can work together, I think the big trick of it, right, is we just need to get those groups starting to work together on the scale of landscapes rather than project by project. And if they can start to do that, if they can start to weave together a shared vision for the Salish Sea, for this watershed, for the Willamette Valley, for Spokane, then they can also start to put together a budget. And once they have a budget, we can actually go now actively fundraise and use all of the whatever of Regenerate Cascadia backend to also now come in and say, all right, let's like, you know, if they're trying to go for a grant, if they're going for whatever, and we can partner and really support those processes is the
Yeah.
hope.
Along those lines and how we create those positive feedback loops, Brandon, I think a really important piece of the puzzle is the storyteller. You know, there is the project coordinators that are so necessary and the communication coordinators that are so necessary for this to happen. But to get that positive feedback loop, you need to tell the story and you need to document the progress and you need to be able to see the positive outcomes so that you can get those regional donors and those other side donors and, you know, those donors that want to just support certain bioregions or projects, and that they know that there's like a larger donor there, they're willing to donate because they see somebody else is willing to donate. So it's getting those feedback loops in place, and that takes really skilled storytelling.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Claire or others.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to say we have been actually having conversations around that. I think one of the things that, and I will talk about that in just a second, but is that by us being able to start actually boosting our own capacity by um, actually bringing in more support from to help us with some of the project management and also some of the details that is really like organizational details, that will allow us to actually be able to start moving on some of the things that are bubbling up. But storytelling is huge. And I don't know if you've seen the Awakening Lands podcast that Benji and Anna have been doing, but they're developing this 10-story process they'd really like to workshop with us. But there's a bunch of this. Sherry Herndon, there's actually, we're talking about a media guild. There are actually a number of people who are actively wanting to develop that storytelling capacity that really does tell the stories that have been neglected, that help to hold the vision of what we're doing at the grassroots. So Brandon.
Yeah, well, and sorry, you're just reminding me too of yeah, we're also talking with we've been talking with Salmon Nation, and they have a large connection to different media contacts. With and do you remember Claire off the top of your head? It's
The
the
the Thai.
yeah, the Thai, thank you. You know, and anyways, there's a whole regional media, you know, connection to journalists who are looking to showcase regenerative work. And so I think that there's an opportunity around podcasts, storytelling, journalism articles that can also then directly just connect and empower with the people who are already doing the work in the landscape. And I think that's exciting. I think there's another element too, which is Brian's kind of bringing in around the storytelling, which is Claire calls this the bioregional animator. I think of it as a bioregional activator. Doesn't really matter, but it's almost like the Joe, right? It's the person who goes into a landscape and, you know, one of the fun things and does that presentation, right? It's the context setting, the onboarding. It gets us all speaking the same language and it's the shared vision and a shared purpose. And what's interesting is that when you have that activator or animator who goes into a community, it's almost like you can use it as a cheap excuse, right? I feel like we almost kind of did that where this activation tour, what was so cool was that we got to use Joe's coming in as a cheap excuse for all of us to get together to organize and to and then what was great is he did a kick-ass presentation that helped us set the frame of our conversation moving forward. And I think that's really powerful. So I'll just stop there, but I think it's a great idea.
I just want to counterbalance that, and then I'd love to let others chime in, and then we'll go on to the next thing. But yeah, some of them like Benji and Anna, what they're helping to develop is how do people giving people the tools, but then also the support to tell their own stories, so that there is that capacity building within the landscapes to do that, but doing it in a way that is actually really professionally done and supported. So yeah. Okay, I think I'm ready. Has anyone got anything? And then I move on to the next piece of news. So yeah, so around that is that we're waiting for it to come out like any time now, in the next week or two, is this white paper that Samantha Powers and Leon Seafield. So Samantha Power is of Finance for Gaia, and Leon Seafield is Dark Matter Labs on financing facilities. And where Regenerate Cascadia was invited to be one of the case studies, and then and really we can see that our participation in the paper has had, you know, quite a it's woven, the influence of what we had to contribute has woven quite a bit into the paper. But what it's you know, this really we're this is something like at the scale of Regenerate Cascadia. It just doesn't exist anywhere. And so it's really interesting for people to be able to see it, but to bring together what's happening in other parts of the world where they're looking at, like, how do we do this work, and how do we how can it be funded? How do we find the people that are on the ground doing this work when they're not connected into the existing structures? How, you know, who are the people doing the regenerative work, and where, you know, the relationship-based regenerative work? So anyway, the paper, you know, I think probably with anything that's this size, I mean, it's a huge paper. It's over 100 pages long, and it involves a lot of different parts. But there's, you know, there's stuff that we would align with about 70% of it, but the rest is like, but that's fine. It's actually a really great jumping off point to sort of to push against, to sort of see what else needs to happen. So anyway, Brandon, I'd love you to jump in and give it a little more.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in and just add. I mean, I think one of the exciting things about this paper is, so this is Samantha Powers, Finance for Gaia, and her entire focus is establishing and setting up bioregional financing facilities. And so when we say that we're working to create a bioregional regeneration fund, that is actually separate or removed from Regenerate Cascadia, where Regenerate Cascadia is providing the administrative kind of core and back end and the structure and the transparency and accountability. When we talk about the Bioregional Regeneration Fund itself, what we're actually talking about is exploring this kind of collaborative partnership where we're actually setting up this idea of almost a landscape fund, a bridge where Regenerate Cascadia serves as kind of a bridge that can connect this global pool of funding down to the landscape level, where that governance exists by the landscape. And so after her goal is, this paper will likely be published in the next couple of weeks. And then her goal is to identify specific bioregions that they feel are ready to receive a bioregional regeneration fund where they can start exploring this idea. And I think one of the exciting things about that is that Regenerate Cascadia has been positioned as one of the possible partners for exploring this process. And so that's really exciting. And it also speaks to why it's really important when we talk about even getting to start this process with little amounts of funding is really important, because it forces us to build in our structure and our governance process before these larger funds start showing up, so that we're not overwhelmed, and so we can slowly be kind of growing the capacity that we need through each step of this process.
Yeah, Brian. Oh, yeah. Has anyone got questions or? Okay, well,
That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, it's super exciting. I mean, this is amazing. The fact that even though for you're sharing, you know, it's been a year and a lot involved, I mean, that is still fantastic. You typically don't see that level of financial support for grassroots efforts such as these. And it also speaks to, I think, hopefully kind of change and interest and desire to start to see more actualized, and that this kind of support will enable that to do so. So congratulations, that's amazing.
All I gotta say is holy guacamole.
Yeah, no, it's but you know, I think that something that really has become clear, and it will become clearer, but once you start to go work at different nested scales, you're suddenly starting to see, like you can start to see what's required, but you also have there's something that actually starts to unlock that just isn't possible at a smaller scale. And so I think that that's what's like um, being able to, I mean, it has been really challenging, and we really appreciate the people who've hung in. I mean, I'm looking at you, Claire, Strawn, Julie, and Brian, who've like really kind of, you know, there've been lots of challenges because we're pretty stretched, but holding the vision together. I was describing, and I'm going to bring this in here because I just think it's such a good example, is Robin Wall Kimmerer describes basket weaving, traditional black ash basket weaving in braiding sweetgrass. And she talks about using I'm trying to think, I think she calls them spikes, the long sort of pieces that you're going to weave with. But you make a cross that she refers to, that the traditional basket weavers refer to as the four directions symbolically are embedded right at the base, but that it takes until you get to the third round of weaving that the structure starts to actually stabilize enough that it isn't kind of going all over the place, and then you can start building in the rest of the shape of the basket. But putting those first and second rounds in, it takes a lot more careful holding it together so that it's not going all over the place. And it feels exactly like that right now. There's a really careful tending, and there's this kind of chaotic place where things are sort of wacky. But if we can keep going with this kind of skill, we will start to be able to weave the basket. And anyway, I just wanted to, it kind of keeps feeling like we're still in that, trying to hold the cross in place. So yeah, so yeah, and there's I also would just love to acknowledge that Taya Seidler, who had been one of the mentors during the Edge Prize. I can't remember what they called them. They had a name for the Edge. Anyway, whatever. She was one of the people that was part of the Edge Prize. And both Brandon and I had really connected with her. She was really helpful when we were putting together the final submission for the Edge Prize. And so that relationship, we contacted her, and sort of once Regenerate Cascadia was going. And then I can't even remember now how it came about with the writing of the paper, but that all came into that relationship, and Taya has basically handheld all the way through in terms of helping us write that case study. And she's been fantastic, but she's down in Australia, which is why she isn't really here, but just really wanting to acknowledge her, and wanting to acknowledge that we're keen to keep this ongoing relationship happening. And she and Edward West, who has been part of also that paper that's been is one of the key advisors in it. And so yeah. So then do you have anything else you want to add about the paper, Brandon, or shall I move on? Okay. So yeah, just wanting to kind of go on to the birthing of the Bioregional Learning Center's learning journey, and just what an important piece of scaffolding really to our process for helping us develop what we need to be doing right now. It really is scaffolding, and so it really opens up a big opportunity. There are people that have joined into this the Cascadia portion that had not been part of Regenerate Cascadia, so there's sort of an infusion of other people. And that the part that I'd like to just sort of mention is that Brandon's going to be developing some of the mapping workshops, which is really fantastic. And so in a way, it kind of pushes us to have to we've got some deadlines and there are things that are falling into a structure, but it's actually really, really helpful because we see the mapping, the place mapping process as a really critical part of the hub formation. So Brandon, I know you've got more to say on that, so I'm going to hand over to you.
No, I think that was well said. I was just going to add some specifics that with the learning journey right now, we've had roughly 200 people, there's 200 people who have, more than 200 people who have signed up for the learning journey through the design school. And we have more than 50 of those from Cascadia and that have kind of joined the Cascadia cohort. So that is really exciting. And yeah, Joe really wants to bring in this idea of bioregional mapping. And I think Claire and I are both going to be working to kind of create a little bit of a manual and a process. And really what it is it's a process, but just like we're kind of creating some shared context and coherence around the definition of bioregional learning center, we also want to kind of create that coherence around what is a bioregion, what is bioregional, and then just what are some processes that every person or group can kind of go through to help get to know their place. And the exciting thing is that this doesn't have to happen in isolation. This is just a cheap excuse for a really nice opportunity where we can kind of also co-create this together. Just as we're creating this process for the design school, it's actually a lovely opportunity too to kind of co-create this through our Cascadia cohort for what we might want to see for landscape hubs to do as well. It's actually going to be pretty much the same process. And so what's really exciting is I think we can kind of like develop the bones of it, but then through the learning journey, we can actually, I think, create this kind of shared cohesion, buy-in, and also where we can be harnessing that collective intelligence that's letting people submit resources and knowledge that should be included as part of this process. And what does that process look like? So yeah, no, I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I agreed. And yeah, so there's a lot more to be said about that, but I think we should move on. We did mention this during one of the last Thursday's session, so I don't know if all of you were there during that. I think most of you are doing the maybe just put a show of hands who's part of the bioregional learning journey. Okay, yeah. Okay, so then I'll just say that, yeah, we're really going to be wanting to develop the capacities for groups on the ground to host we're calling them bioregional salons, and maybe putting a handbook together that as a resource, as a sort of core building block for groups on the ground to start generating the energy. And one of the things we talked about, and I know that having done quite a lot of the community art work, but community development work, is that you can build all this excitement, but then you need to have something to catch and channel that excitement, and sort of everyone's starting to hold this vision, and it now needs scaffolding. And we see the salons as this place to help build that excitement on the ground and sort of coherence around it. But especially if it's supported with, in the handbook, we're thinking things like, how do you start having conversations that sort of really challenge people's lack of education in this area? So, including a bioregional quiz. I can't even remember the other things we'd brainstormed, but we'd love to co-create that as a resource with others. If you could think of good things that would be helpful in the process. I think Melanie shared with us, Melanie Caron, shared with us how they're doing bioregional salons and some of their process, where they start with storytelling. And anyway, they've got a whole way of actually hosting their salons that maintains like really good coherence with the group. And so, you know, sharing some of that structure, maybe some of the, anyway, things that would be really helpful. And so, sort of, as we started to think through the salons, we knew that was a really good place to sort of encourage people to start. And also to be, the other thing is people are really hungry to connect. And so creating really low barrier ways for people to connect. Sorry, and I will just put this in there. What we were noticing, and I think Brian, you especially have seen this, but others have seen it, is that we actually, groups on the ground have a very low level of capacity to hold the structures without more support. And so we wanted to encourage people to do something that was low barrier, but recognize that the next stage needed to be more supported. And just to sort of name that, I think there's something very powerful about actually naming that this work is actually, it cannot be done by volunteers once it gets to the point where you're starting to hold it, and just being clear about that. Because so long as it's not named, there continues to be an expectation that it can be, and it's just not going to hold. And I mean, so do you want to say anything else, Brandon, or should we move on? And those are most of the updates I was wanting to share with you. And then we kind of wanted to just give some space to anyone doing stuff on the ground that you were wanting to, that you felt that you had been involved with in the work of Regenerate Cascadia, that you felt was like an update that you'd like to share in terms of the work you've been doing. Yes, Claire.
Okay, well, first of all, in terms of the learning journey work, it's interesting learning curve for me. And the reasons why is because this whole notion of building coherence is a really good conversation. And I'm starting to think about it, it's helping people shift from the individualized and the project-based to the relational and landscape-based. And so that's the shift, and that's what that's the conversation that is unfolding. And it's one of those things that's really deep, but people is like, duh, I don't know. But, and how that's manifesting though is, I'm trying to organize this, I am organizing this event on the 26th. And I would not say that the salons that Melanie does is bioregional salons, by the way. They have a whole different kind of woo-woo orientation and framework. That's why I was making that face. But we want to grow that and have monthly things that are focused on bioregional development. But so when I'm talking to people and I have a huge network in Eugene of mostly activists and in different realms, and in my mind, all those things are related into whole systems thinking, and I'm trying to make the scope of the salon be broad enough sweep. I mean, the discussion question is, what is her story of place, and people are saying, well, is it just going to be talking, or is there anything real that's happening? And there's things like, well, and I'm working with Community Rights Lane County, which is putting forward a ballot initiative to protect the watersheds from aerial spraying and pesticides. Hello, is that part of what we're about? How more connected can you make that? And they're like, well, I don't know if we have time to go to that kind of thing. And I said, well, why don't you come and just recruit some petitioners? So the articulation of why this matters to you is something that we're all working on together, and I want to appreciate that that's on the table for deepening. I'm hoping that I can offer some learnings from that off of this organizing work that we're trying right now. But it's challenging, you know.
I think it's really challenging. And what's interesting, yeah, and it's almost like, yeah, so I think that's a great input, and I don't think that that's going to be unique. I think that'll be something
Right.
that, I think people will always face because people are so tapped out in issue. And I think one of the things that I was really excited about when Melanie was sharing the other day was just that, man, there's so many great lessons to learn, I think, from how to host a bioregional salon. And also named Sherry is another person who's
Yeah.
just an amazing resource where she's just got resource after resource after resource. And so being able to harness and focus this a little bit to also like, let's develop a template for a bioregional salon, that any hub could use, that gives it a clear purpose and focus. And I think also helping, going back to what Brian's talking about, giving that really simple, clear answer of like, what is Regenerate Cascadia? What's a landscape hub? Why is it important? Why should someone care? What are they doing? And I think part of what we would like to do is almost start to weave together these I think Joe, yeah, the activation tour was really interesting. And one of the lessons we learned is that it's almost like our audience is people who are leaned in, and it's like people who like get the issues, and they're like ready, and they kind of like get it. And also you want to be invited, right? Like you want to be invited in so that people are actually going to respect the work that you're doing and kind of know. And then, but what we would like to do is kind of almost through the learning journey or through other things, through these local gatherings of meeting up for cups of coffee, for the bioregional salon, for just a campfire, for other things, is starting to develop the actual in-person relationships, the trust, the connections for people who might want to do this work in an area. And then hopefully we can actually start to seed funding for the processes in that landscape. So, and it's not going to be a lot this first year, but hopefully it can help like hold those processes and help us put together a better ask for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll stop there, but yeah,
Well,
yeah.
there was one other piece that I think might be important as you're thinking about that ask, or even this year,
Yeah.
but one of the things that okay, so the whole issue of quote frontline communities comes up. It's like, we can't do this work because we're saving people's lives, and I'm like, and I just find that so frustrating. But one of the things that would help with that is that I know up north where y'all are, there's been much more partnership with the indigenous nations. And we have some relationships down here, but I'm wondering if there can be something from Department of Bioregions that reaches out to the whole network of tribes and says, hey, we're doing this. We're building hubs in different areas. These hubs want to be in partnership with you and figure out how we can build those relationships.
So directly in response to that, I will just say it's been one of the things that we've actually been talking about is developing a process that actually starts to explore what shared stewardship and frameworks look like with First Nations in each different area. And that is one of the important roles I think that landscape hubs will be reaching out and connecting with each of these First Nations in partnership, because that'll be different for each area, and there's going to be a lot of sense making that's going to be needed to happen for that. In terms of, in some areas, it might be you work with the tribe or the First Nation, the government of it. In other areas, that might be you might work with the hereditary chiefs, but not the. And then in other areas, you might work with organizations, but not the governments. And in other areas, you might work with individuals and none of the above. And so it's going to be there's going to have to be a whole sense making process and figuring that out. And we're actually talking with, so Salmon Nation has been a great partnership for this discussion. And then we're also talking about working with a person named Olivia, who's in Portland, who works very closely actually exploring this. And she helped do the Salmon Nation Festival of What Works, and works very closely with many of the different nations. And to actually help us develop a set of like process or protocols that a landscape hub could take in you know, whether it's arranging a listening tour or other things, and having that be part of the process of what a landscape hub goes through, along with maybe it's like pro-social, along with finding the bioregional frameworks, as long as the vision or the regenerative portfolio, but it can be one of the steps and we can have that process. In addition, we will also be starting like the higher level, I think, actual discussions where we're reaching out. And then this is also where we'd like to be inviting in elders of different First Nation and Indigenous communities to come in and talk and share, to be sharing their knowledge, their wisdom, but also like projects they're affiliated with, different lessons and things like that. Because I think there's a great opportunity for collaboration and learning.
I don't know if this is possible, but if there is some way that there can be an endorsement or a higher level. I hear that you're saying that there's different forms that different areas have, but of like, okay, this Grand Ronde tribe knows what Regenerate Cascadia is and thinks it's a good idea. And if you want to connect with them in relationship to your hub or whatever, this is who you talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we are talking about as well is actually having a liaison officer so that is with Olivia, so that it can actually kind of help navigate that. But I mean, really, we're going to be co-creating this with the people like you know, who are coming up with those ideas of what it needs to be, but just naming it, that's really important. And actually we can get it really wrong as well if we, you know, there are protocols that just require a certain level of knowledge and building attention. So
and developing the processes so that landscapes can enter into those conversations and things appropriately is going to be really important.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up something just that you made me think of, Claire, on one of the other questions that you had. And that is, you know, we get to meet with a lot of different groups that are not joined into Regenerate Cascadia at this point, sometimes as potential fiscal sponsors, but, you know, one of the things we're realizing is some of them have got stories that really help to illustrate the incoherence of the national boundary, the nation state. And so actually getting to collect people's stories about what isn't working. And so one of the groups was welcoming whales, where, you know, essentially there are no boundaries on that. And they're the data collection they can do and the finance, like all of the issues, like every single issue is an issue with the boundary, and actually breaks down any ability to do the work that's required. So we do see that just even by collecting those stories, we can start to have a voice that really starts to make the case that it's just, there's a lot of incoherence. Whereas who has been advocating those stories? This is also an area. So you were talking about frontline communities being, you know, being able to do that. I think that once you get to a larger scale, so we can go way off topic on all of this stuff, but I just wanted to bring that up.
I'll jump in and actually say that, so Claire just touched on something very important and might actually be another update that would be nice to just touch on briefly. And that is with the idea of money coming in, we're looking at actually starting to like pay ourselves. And part of that is figuring out how we're going to pay each other and to pay Claire. And that's forcing us to actually like start to, I mean, one of the big things about this whole thing is that, so I live in Seattle, Claire lives in Victoria. We share one watershed, but we're in two different countries. And so that's one of the reasons why it was such a great partnership from the start, is I think that that's actually a really powerful dichotomy when you're talking about bioregional frameworks, and especially when you're talking about the Salish Sea. And so like with welcoming whales, they're based in Lund, British Columbia, and they're exploring, they wanted to explore fiscal sponsorship where we sponsor their nonprofit activities. And they're trying to figure out, well, what does that mean for a British Columbia thing? Because they cannot operate south of the border, and which makes no sense if you're doing whales. And, you know, specifically, I think they're working with I think,
Humpback.
yeah, humpback whales. And so, you know, and they want to partner for research, and they want to go do learning tours, and they also want to engage with the Regenerate Cascadia network to go do in-person meetings. That is all wonderful, and that is perfect, and it's exactly what we'd like to encourage. And so we can use this as an opportunity to explore not only ways that we can put together case studies of how the border is blocking effective cooperation and working together. We can put together our own informational commons, which is going to take its own work. But more than that, we can put together these case studies that we can actually start pressuring, policymakers in Washington and British Columbia to make this easier, because it makes no sense. And I think there's a lot of support for that. I would also just say that through this process, we're also going to start to develop. I mean, it's very complex. So Claire's actually looking at, and we're talking with our legal team. Claire's talking to legal teams and accountants in British Columbia, but it's going to be, how do we register in British Columbia, and what is our partnership and relationship, and how are we setting up our bank accounts? Because this comes down to insurance liability. This comes down to the nonprofit. So like, it's a 501c3 in the United States. But are we going to register as an association? Are we going to register as a charitable organization in Canada? How does that work? What's the working relationship? Is it a subsidiary? And it's incredibly complicated. And as we go through and navigate this, we can make these tools available for other people as well to help simplify. And we can also provide our legal, expertise or our accounting experience to different projects, hoping to cross the border in the future. So I'll stop there, but I think that's a really important facet, actually, that Claire has started to really look into.
Yeah, and actually, just saying, if anyone does know of accountants who do this cross-border thing, it'd be great to, because they are, we're getting names from all sorts of people, but it's very specialized accounting too. So, and navigating the nonprofit area. So I am wondering if it's not coming time to do the running through, and actually wanted to invite, like, if you're don't feel that you need to stay for it, we'd love you to, but but just wondering if there's anything else that people would like to raise before we do go into the presentation.
Well, I'm just curious, having just the first opportunity to meet everybody here, will there be opportunity after that? I mean, what we're looking to try and do here is great to have it line up. We have limited capacity to share. We don't personally have time to, just due to the work schedule, ability to even attend the design school sessions, and some of the things that we are already doing on the ground here seem like they definitely align, but it's wanting to see, like, if there's 10 minutes after the presentation to at least touch base maybe with you, Claire or Brandon, about how we can be further connected. But I think what you are bringing up is exactly what we're already experiencing here, is that we want to plug in, we want to be part of the bigger, but we've got limited time on the ground, we got limited folks, and folks that are in need of a very clear vision, as Claire Strong mentioned, to plug in. And so there's a lot of ways that it seems like, oh yeah, this is awesome timing for where we're at, what's happening in the Central Oregon Coast region. But just that chance to be able to speak a little bit more about it maybe after the presentation. So I don't want to disrupt your schedule.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. And Nicole, we can also set up a time anytime to meet. It'd be nice to invite Tanya as well. But and just to say that a lot of this is being co-created, and we are operating always on the assumption that we are busy, and just because someone's busy or not able to attend the meetings, we never want that to be a deciding factor about whether you're like involved or not involved. Like, if you want to be involved and you say you want to be involved, and even if you're busy, even if you can't make the meetings, it's entirely okay. And our goal is to grow the capacity so that we can better support, and that also then we can help build your capacity to better support. So just to name that as well. So never feel bad, or like if you can't make it, oh no. But we would love to either stay afterwards today or set up a time where we can talk more directly.
That'd be great. And just, thinking about what role Regenerate Cascadia could serve, given the fact of such limited capacity on the ground. And so to be able to bring forward some just thoughts can share after the presentation about you know, maybe what that could start to look like, some tools that would make it easier so that it doesn't end up, as you so mentioned, if you don't have scaffolding in place, seeing too many of these initial sparks fizzle too quickly before things turned into deep roots, so to speak. So,
Right.
All right. Well, should we go?
Yeah, well, just
So
maybe before we
what
do
kind
that,
of feedback do you want from this on this presentation? Yeah.
you know what, Claire, I'm actually excited to think that, we can record this present. I think what would be really nice, because, Claire A and myself have been so busy that we're barely keeping up. But we put this presentation together, and I think if we think of it as a rough draft, literally for your Eugene presentation, and then maybe you can give us feedback, we take your notes, and then we actually put together a nicer recording with visuals
Okay.
that we can provide for your group. And what do you think about that, Claire A?
Yeah, no, I think that would be good. I think it would be good to just have, I mean, we've kind of known, as I said before, people need like this, what Brian was was saying, I need this thing that can help, tell the story more succinctly than we have before. And I think in writing submitting the case study for the white paper, we've had to get a lot more sort of honed in how we're telling the story. So we've kind of had lots of practices sort of going around. So I'm sure there's still tons of room for improvement, and but it's good just to have something that's a little more slick. And so yeah, I think that doing that and then just having it as I like your suggestion, Brandon.
Yeah. Is the case study available from the website or someplace?
No, we actually have been asked not to share it until I think the paper hasn't been published yet,
Hmm.
and they didn't want it published ahead of the white paper, like
Okay.
made public. So there
We
are people, yeah,
Yeah, we can share.
we
Yeah,
can
we'll
share
share,
private,
like if you would like to see it, just we can share it internally, just don't share it.
Got it.
yeah.
And then as soon as the paper gets published, then we're allowed to share it and we can do all the other stuff. And then, yeah, so what would be really great is, because I don't think this will be the slick presentation yet, but what would be really lovely is maybe we just read through it. And as we're going, if people want to put in, in the chat, feel free to maybe put in feedback you have. And then afterwards, we can actually just have a conversation about it, of what's missing, what could be cleaned up, what's confusing, what's clunky. And yeah. And I bet we could even, yeah, anyways, no, but that's good.
Are people up to that right now? Yeah. So do you want to do the screen sharing for the visuals? Do you want to try and do the visuals, or do you want to
Yes.
Sure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to restart the recording just so we have it on a different loop.
great.